So let's wrap up this module and tie all the major elements of the course together. Some experts out there argue that the technological innovations that are coming and the pace of innovation will unleash changes on humanity that we are not prepared for.
Indeed, throughout this course, we've explored a number of possible challenges and pitfalls that could come about because of certain fintech advancements and business models. These challenges include bias, job displacement, a distancing of proximate and intimate human relationships, increased inequality, loss of privacy, cybersecurity threats, and more.
Maybe after hearing us discuss all these different challenges and potential problems, you may now be of the opinion that our prospects are bleak and that there is nothing that we can do to stop the eventual arrival of a dark, dystopian future.
But the reality is that both David and I are extremely optimistic about the future, and our hope for fintech and fintech innovations has a lot to do with that. As mentioned earlier in the course, the reality is that the world today is empirically better in almost every measurable category than it was even just 30 or 40 years ago. And from where we stand, the future looks to be even better.
But it is also true that the challenges we face today, whether in the fintech space or otherwise, are not the kind of problems that can be solved by the decisions or actions of just a small group of people. The problems are entirely too complex. Think of climate change, the future of work, the potential challenges brought about by AI, blockchain, and other fintech innovations. This requires an intelligent conversation among a broad swath of society.
Now, we are all impacted by these things and therefore all need to educate ourselves, think deeply and broadly about the implications, and patiently and intelligently discuss what we want for our society.
So we leave this course where we started, with a choice. Do we want a utopian future where resource scarcity is a thing of the past, where basic finance tools are accessible to all, and inequality is reduced, where bias is removed from financial decisions and accountability is transparent and fair?
If we want these things, fintech is likely going to be a huge piece of the puzzle necessary to get us there.
So looking back, what are the underlying ethics concepts that we all need to keep in mind when considering an ethical fintech landscape?
The first is trust. As we covered in Module 1, trust is the bedrock principle upon which the financial industry has been built for over a millennia. People need to trust that their financial institution will protect them and their money, will always hold their customers' needs above their own selfish interests, and is a reliable partner for all aspects of financial transactions.
Unfortunately, some financial institutions have breached customer trust, which not only harms their own business, but also has broad implications for all of society. So fintech innovators, including the large tech fins, need to ensure that the tools they are building are trustworthy and safe, and that their business models do not abuse customer relationships by selling data, maintaining lax security protocols, and other inappropriate practices that have unfortunately got some technology companies into trouble recently.
As Klaus Schwab, founder of the World Economic Forum, said, "In a world where nothing is constant anymore, trust becomes one of the most valuable attributes. Trust can only be earned and maintained if decision makers are embedded within a community and taking decisions always in the common interest and not in pursuit of individual objectives."
The second underlying ethics concept that we discussed several times relates to this idea of proximity. Now, proximity is defined as a nearness in space, time, or relationship. And in this course, we typically use it to denote how connected an action is to its outcome.
So for example, in the trolley problem example from earlier, the situation where we are asked to pull a lever to divert the trolley is less proximate than the situation where we're asked to directly push someone in front of the trolley. In the first example, the mere fact that we were asked to pull a lever puts some cognitive dissonance between the action of actually pulling the lever and the eventual outcome of someone getting hurt. But when we're asked to push someone directly, the action of pushing and the outcome of the person getting hurt are physically and emotionally connected.
You may not realize it, but our brain reacts differently based on how proximate a situation is. The more proximate a situation is, the more we can emotionally connect to it, and therefore, we are more likely to choose to behave morally and ethically. In non-proximate situations, we are more likely to behave unethically because we do not feel a connection to the harm.
This has many implications in fintech ethics. For a simple example, as we shared earlier, people tend to spend more when using credit cards rather than cash because credit cards seem more distant. But when they hold that cash in their hand, we tend to connect it with the hard work that went into actually earning that money.
Well, from a proximity standpoint, the reality is that fintech is driving people further and further away from personal emotional connections. When we purchase something online, we don't have an opportunity to look someone in the eye and speak to them. And while that may be more efficient and possibly cheaper, that distance is changing the way of how we interact in society.
Now, for a really clear example of this in a non-fintech space, just take a minute to read the comments from any news story or video. People on the internet are mean, much meaner than they are in real life. Now, why? Well, in part because commenters don't have to look the person in the eye and deal with the real emotional fallout of hurting their feelings.
Is there a way that fintech innovators can increase efficiency and reduce cost while also increasing our emotional connection to the broader community? Should this even be a goal? Well, all we know is that a less proximate world would almost certainly lead to a relatively bleak outlook for humanity. So we hope that connectivity and a sense of community are not sacrificed as we seek enhanced efficiency.
Now, the third underlying ethics concept that we discussed throughout the course is accountability. In a fintech-dominated world, who will be accountable for decisions and actions that machines and algorithms make? It's pretty clear at this point that legal systems around the world are not well prepared for ascribing responsibility for things like injuries from autonomous driving vehicles, potential bias in decisions relating to financial products and mortgages, right, and breaches of privacy and other utilizations of fintech.
When you remove humans from the equation, sometimes you make a process fairer and less biased, or at least less reliant on our flawed decision-making processes and human subjectivity. But it also means that you no longer have a person to point to, or potentially blame when something does go wrong. Are we ready for that type of future?
Now, our hope is that a comprehensive approach is taken by innovators, regulators, corporate players, and even among us, the consumers, to ensure that all stakeholder voices are heard and the finance industry continues to be more transparent and representative rather than more closed off.
The fourth underlying ethics concept was privacy. We've already talked about this a lot, and this is one of the ethics concepts that many of you hear about on a regular basis. But that doesn't reduce the importance of this issue and the need for our society to continue to consider the importance of privacy in our lives. Indeed, this will be one of the great debates of our generation.
Now, a study was done observing how ethics principles were valued among different generations, and the researchers discovered that in almost every single category, the current kind of millennial generation valued the same ethical concepts as more mature generations. The one category that showed a significant difference was privacy.
The reality is that young people today are growing up in a world without privacy, at least privacy in the sense of what it meant when we were younger. And this is having a significant impact on how people view or value privacy in their lives.
And who knows, maybe ultimately that's a good thing. Our point is merely that we have to consider the ultimate long-term ramifications of these changes while we still can. And financial institutions and technology innovators need to really ensure that they maintain client trust by building business models that value customer privacy rather than simply profiting off of our personal information.
Finally, the fifth underlying concept was culture lag. If you recall, culture lag is the idea that some aspects of culture, particularly technology, change and adapt much faster than other aspects of culture, like religion and the law. And many of the most significant social problems that exist are caused and perpetuated because of this gap.
We gave several examples of this, including how smartphones were adopted almost overnight. But it took nearly a decade for people to realize the negative impacts that smartphones were having on their lives. It's critical for fintech innovators to really consider the implications of how their technologies will impact people, not only in the present, but also into the future.
For example, one of the biggest challenges that will be faced over the next century will be ensuring that the millions of people whose jobs are eliminated by fintech innovations, the drivers, cashiers, and yes, even some finance professionals, lawyers, accountants, and even doctors, are able to be retrained and reintegrated into the workforce.
This means that we also need to reconsider the way that we are educating ourselves and our children. As one commentator pointed out, our current education system is preparing our children for the future of work incorrectly. He stated that we are scared that human jobs are going to be replaced by robots, but we're still teaching kids to think like machines.
We hope that you have enjoyed this journey together and that we have given you something to think about, to consider and ponder about the present as well as the future. We are really excited about the future and truly believe that fintech has the potential for significant global impact.
But for that to happen, together we need to forge a future that works for everyone. And we will do that by putting people first. Again, as Klaus Schwab said, fintech tools are tools made by people for people.
Once again, we stand at a precipice, but we do so together. So together, let's take the steps necessary to take the utopian society that we see in the movies and make it a reality.